Okay, welcome back. As you can see, I have taken the frame pieces, everything out of the plastic. I've got it all laid out here. We'll talk about a couple of quick things about this build, the frame build, real quick. First and foremost, all the carbon pieces. Again, we talked about the quality of the main frame itself. I did kind of a bad job in the first video of keeping this part in frame, so I'm going to do my very best. Hopefully you can see all of this. We talked about these frames are extremely smooth already. Now I did take a little bit of 200 grit sandpaper and just hit every edge. I like to hide wires. I may not be the best at making the helis clean looking wiring, but I do my darndest. And even as smooth as these are, I wanted to be 100% sure that there wasn't going to have any extra help in the chafing of the wires department. So I hit all of these. I also went around all the edges on these. Now this didn't take a whole lot. I mean, I think I may have spent a total of 10 minutes doing it because this carbon is just so clean already. I mean, even the ESC tray is nice and clean. Everything is milled perfectly. There's no defects. I don't see, I mean, other than the occasional scratch, and I got to hold it just right in the light to even see that. I mean, these frames are perfect. Anti-rotation brackets, carbon fiber. The ESC, the battery tray is 2 pieces. We'll talk about that in a minute, but they're carbon fiber, and all of it's 2 mils, very durable. This is the box that goes with the boom clamps to make the boom box. The rear gyro tray and the rear frame support that go down underneath, those are nice. Even the carbon tail fin, I mean, that's really rigid. You're going to be able to touch the ground with that and be safe. It's not going to be like you graze the ground, the tail fin breaks off. I mean, it's really sturdy. I like that a lot. One other thing I want to talk about, main blocks. This is a little hard to see when you're in the plastic, so I'm going to talk about it again. Everything is already, the screws are already in the right place. The servos mount to the main blocks. Excuse me, left and right aileron servos do at least. Holes, the screws are already in the right holes. Everything is accounted for. You're going to know very quickly if you're missing something. Upper and middle frame main bearings and motor block and bearing blocks are identical. There's reversible orientation. We'll talk about those when it comes time to put them in. And then, of course, the lower bearing block, also very, very high quality milled aluminum. Bearings are already in. You just got to make sure you install them correctly so they're properly captured, but everything's there. Real quick, before I start putting things together, I want to talk about all of these. Hopefully you can see those on the camera really well. These are the various pieces that become the frame spacers. They bolt to the carbon fiber pieces in various ways, and they all bolt the 2 halves of the frame together along with the torque tube transmission. 2 of these are not like the others, and I want to talk about why real quick. All of these 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 of these frame spacers are actually the same piece of metal. Pre-assembled though, this one's missing the 2 Phillips screws in the top, and this one has 2 much longer bolts in the sides with washers. It will be obvious during the assembly, but I want to make sure you make note of it now. Obviously the 2 longer ones, that post needs to end up in the back of the frame because that's where the boom supports mount. And the one missing the Phillips screws goes in the rear of the frame because it doesn't have a piece of CF that bolts to it. It's just a frame spacer, so there's no Phillips screws. So don't think you're missing Phillips screws there. That's on purpose. These are the 2 double as frame spacers as well as reinforcements for the landing skids bolts. And again, the bolts that hold the landing skids to them are in the package with the landing skids. Don't think you're missing something there. All in all, pretty straightforward. What I'm going to do next, this is very self-explanatory. I'm not going to take time on the video to video mounting every piece of these metal to the CF. It's pretty straightforward. The CF is milled. You grab one of these. The countersunk, the Phillips screws are tapered. Make sure you install them so that the taper is lined up with the countersink so you have a smooth surface. You're not interfering with your electronics. I'm going to go ahead and get all the frame spacers mounted to the carbon fiber, and then start assembling the side block. When we come back, I'm going to have a portion of it together. I want to show you how the transmission bolts though. So when I come back, I'll have some of it together and we'll be talking about the main blocks and the transmission. Okay guys, all of the aluminum cross braces are on the CF. Frame bars, gyro plate, tail boom box. I went ahead and pulled all the side pieces out, put them in a little butt cup. It's pretty obvious which bolts go where. You can leave them in the actual piece of metal until it's time to install that piece if you wish. I think it'd just be a little faster to take them out now. But everything's ready to go. The next step is going to be to pull out the frame and start placing pieces. Now the manual suggests starting with the bearing blocks, and I agree with that. It's easier now to double check your directions and the orientation of the bearings when you don't have a bunch of stuff in the way. So I'm going to go ahead and mount the 3 bearing blocks, and when I come back I will do my best to explain which directions the bearings go. Okay guys, I have the 3 bearing blocks in the correct orientation. One thing to note, the 2 frame halves are universal. Doesn't matter which side you put it on, so just pay close attention. The notch for the elevator servo and the rudder servos are in the back, so when you're orienting the bearing blocks, make sure you mount them correctly. The bolts won't really line up if you don't get it right, but just save yourself the headache of trying and make sure the elevator and rudder servos are in the back. This E5 does have 3 bearing blocks. It's quickly becoming standard, and I'm glad for it. The upper bearing block has to be oriented with the bearing cup up, because there is a collar that will go down over the shaft that helps retain the upper bearing. The middle bearing block is oriented with the cup down, and the lower third bearing block is oriented with the cup up. What happens here is when the main gear is installed and the main shaft, and the main gear are installed, the second and third bearing are retained by the hub and the collar that goes here themselves, and then the top bearing is held in place by the collar that keeps the whole shaft from riding up and down inside the assembly. So this is the proper orientation: top bearing up, middle bearing down, bottom bearing up. Also, real quick note, I went ahead and Loctited all 8 of these screws, but I left this bottom one loose until I'm ready to put the shaft in. The reason being is this third bearing block is slotted. I don't know how well you can see that on the camera, but that is moving about 1/8 of an inch either direction. The reason for that is so you can leave this loose, put the main shaft in, spin it a few times, and then snug this up so that there's no binding of the shaft. It's a straight through, no problems whatsoever. So obviously no Loctite on these 2 screws yet, as we will need to leave that free while you put the shaft in. Next step is going to be starting just putting the various pieces of carbon on. I'm going to go ahead and jump to the transmission just because it's easier now than before you put all these carbon pieces in here. The transmission bolts to the frame on the rear half. Orientation is important. They won't really go in if you get it wrong, but save yourself the headache and try to get it right. The slot where the torque tube ends up going in, of course, goes towards the boom, and then the spur gear we just replaced to make this a 4.5 to 1 goes on the bottom, so it's slung low. So this actually goes in here, right there, and the 4 screws that go into the posts hold it in place, and then when you put the other half of the frame together, there'll be 4 screws into those posts holding it there. I'm going to go ahead and mount the transmission and start mounting the various pieces of carbon, and when I come back, I'll have everything mounted to one side of the frame. One thing I almost forgot to mention, it's very important, so I'm going to cut in real fast. When you put this transmission in here, you need to note that the 4 holes that hold it in place are also slightly slotted. That is incredibly important. That is going to allow you to make sure the mesh on this gear and the spur gear is correct. Too much pressure, wear gears prematurely and eat up your auto rotation of inertia. I am going to start out by snugging these up with the transmission all the way back at the lightest possible mesh, and then once I get the main shaft in, the main gear in, and everything's ready to go, and I can test it before I put the boom on and the boom block, I will check that mesh and adjust it. So I did not put Loctite on those 4 screws at this juncture because I just need to plan to move those to set that mesh. Once the mesh is set, snug them down, take one at a time, Loctite them, do the other with the other side, and then you're just one more step to make sure your mesh drivetrain is problem free. Okay guys, as you can see, we're making a lot of progress. I got pretty much all of the frame spacers and carbon fiber pieces in place. What's next happens to be the single brace I talked about who didn't have Phillips screws that goes back here. The reason we have to stop, I'm cutting in real quick, is this is the first opportunity we have to talk about the canopy mounts for this. Now, this is something that I was truly pleased when I saw this was the setup going to be. Matt has engineered his own version, something that's like a keychain quick release type of canopy mount. It's pretty straightforward. I love breakaway tabs. You guys flying other brands are gonna recognize those. It's the first time I've seen this on a Synergy product with the breakaway tab. So the idea isn't to save the canopy. If you crash hard enough to break that tab, the canopy's probably toast anyway, but that will break rather than your frame side. Hopefully, that's the plan. One extra point, try to make this thing versatile and crash friendly. We all, we could say we're not going to crash, we're just fooling ourselves. It's going to happen eventually. Crash hard enough to break the canopy, that's going to break off and hopefully save your side frame. So, excellent piece of engineering. The reason I'm talking about this real quick now is these are actually two different lengths of these casings. Hold these so you can see them, hopefully. Hopefully you can see this. This one here is shorter than this one. This is actually a 17 millimeter tall, and this one is 21 millimeters tall. Now, this is important because the rear mounts are the 17 millimeter, the smaller, and the front mounts are the longer 21 millimeter mounts. And you got to make sure you get that right now, otherwise you just save yourself a lot of headache and not have to take everything apart twice. So take an extra minute, make sure that you have two of each, which you should. The long ones are the front and the short ones are the rear. I'm going to go ahead and get those on. The front ones actually go as part of the ESC tray. The rear one bolts to this piece out here by itself. So I'm going to take a second, get these all together, and go from there. Okay guys, there it is. One whole frame side complete. ESC tray is not on yet because you need the clearance to get your hand in there to do the pinion and the motor, which we will do here in a little bit. It's the ESC tray. I actually do that close to last when I'm doing my electronics because I like to be able to swing the ESC up out of the way. Again, I like to hide wires, so I'm going to play with the orientation of the ESC to get the motor wires clear and out of line of sight. So that's not on yet. The canopy quick releases are on. I went ahead and prepped the other side of the frame. The only thing that gets pre-screwed to this are the two quick releases. Doing that now will keep you from having to try to get these nuts tight with the frame together. I don't know about you, I have big hands. Even though this frame width is 52 millimeters, I don't think I could get in there real easy. So I went ahead and prepped that. So all we really got to do is turn this guy over, set this on here, get the Loctite and screws ready. I'm not going to bore you with watching me do that. When we come back, I will have this guy, the frame, together, and I'll be talking about the landing skids. Alright guys, there it is. Our completed main frame assembly. Oops, got a little extra Loctite on there. My goodness. I'm not normally so sloppy with that. Sorry about that. All are together. As you can see, there's obviously no Loctite on these bolts for the boom supports yet. But as she's together, I left the main third bearing block loose so I can adjust that mesh in a second. But there is the bulk of the frame. Pretty clean install, like we said before. And what I do, there it is. The next thing to do is going to be to take the main gear, pull this collars off. Talk about this main gear for a second. You'll notice this main gear has 3 Jesus bolt holes. That is because down here in the bottom there are actually 2 Jesus bolts. There's a second collar that goes down here and the Jesus bolt that goes through the auto rotation hub. So when you're putting this in here, make sure you get that right. This is our opportunity to slide this down through here, and if everything is lined up properly, I don't know if you can see that on camera, but this third bearing block was actually over. Let it move over. Make sure that can move in and out smoothly. I'm going to take my wrench, my 2.5, and snug down that third bearing block. Still moving safe, flip it over. Snug down this side. Still comes in and out smooth, spins free. Now I can go ahead, pull those bolts one by one and Loctite the 4 bolts in the third bearing block, and that main shaft will go in there no problem. Spins nice and free. The instructions have us go ahead and put the main gear on next. I don't like having a lot of weight. I'm going to go ahead and put the skids on next. So when we come back, I'll have the table cleared back off. We're putting the skids together. Alright guys, closing in on having the airframe basically together. Now we've got the skids to do. Now, for those of you who have never built a Synergy kit, this part's a little bit different. A lot of manufacturers just have a set screw that goes down into the strut to hold the tube. Synergy takes it one step further. There's actually this little aluminum nut that slides down into the tube, that the bolts go down through the strut into that nut, giving you something you can lock It's also a lot easier to pull them apart if we need to. It is a little tedious lining the holes up. I've actually learned to use a piece of zip tie, stick them in the far end, because the zip tie end will go down into the threads and you can actually use it to help turn. Just takes a second. I'm going to go ahead and get the struts and the tubes built. Put the tube caps on. When we come back, I'll have that built and ready to put it on the heli itself. Well guys, there it is. The main portion of the frame is together. All the carbon fibers in, the bearing blocks are tight, third bearing block is Loctited, and the main shaft still comes in and out and rotates free. Skids are on, as you can see, and she sits pretty. That is the bulk of the airframe right there, guys. It's pretty straightforward. I'm sure you've noticed by now, but there were no mandatory modifications, no mandatory changes. Some flexibility in the setup. I love the flexibility in the torque tube gear mesh. I love the flexibility of the third bearing block. We obviously haven't done the motor mount and the pinion bearing yet. We'll get to that when I start talking about electronics. That's another video. Today's goal is to get the entire airframe together. From there, we're going to move to the tail. Now, I have already cut the boom and torque tube. Pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and do as promised. And the next video, the next segment, will pick up with me having the tail box completely torn apart. I'm not expecting to find anything here worth really mentioning, but I'll still go through it with you. Just make sure you Loctite everything. Don't over tighten this pinion. There's a nylock screw on that for a reason. This needs to be able to move freely. I'll get her all torn down. We'll talk about that. But I'm going to go ahead and put the main gear in and double check my torque tube transmission mesh while I'm here. Real quick, as I sit here working on the main gear, I want to talk about these collars for a second. These collars are shaped specifically for their application. This silver one is the collar that goes above the auto rotation bracket. It might be kind of hard to see on the video, but there is an upside down and right side up on these collars. The silver one, the edge that has the rim or the shelf, that actually goes up, because that's what goes up and presses up against the bearing in the second bearing block, holding that bearing in place. And the collar that goes on the top, that same ridge, goes down. That goes in and impacts the inner race on the top bearing, not only holding it in place, but preloading the bearing. So make sure when you're putting these collars on, you're getting that right. Silver one with shelf up, green, gunmetal gray collar, ridge down. Okay guys, I got the main shaft and the main gear in here, and I thought of something I wanted to show you. When we talked about having two collars, this part's kind of important. When you're putting these collars in, I recommend tightening things up in this order. I slid everything through, got the Jesus bolts lined up with both. But what I did was I pulled up on the main shaft, then tightened the one-way bearing, Jesus. And I don't mean tighten it, I mean just snug it up. Let the nylock bolt do its job. You don't want to stretch that shoulder bolt, but still have a little pressure on it. So I pulled up on there, snug that one, and then I push down while pulling up on this collar when I snug this one. What that does is make sure you're properly preloading these two bearings, keeps them from floating. If you do that right, this main shaft shouldn't have any up and down play, and the top collar is simply to hold the bearing in place. You should not have to really torque down this collar. If you got these right, it should not have any lateral movement. And then while I'm thinking about it, talking about, as you can see, the one-way spins free, torque tube gear mesh. I actually stuck my finger in here and held it and checked it. And I just have the ever so slight bit of lash in there. I mean, ever so slight. So I got lucky, and the all the way back position on these slotted holes worked out to be perfect for me. I'm not going to promise that'll be right for everybody, because remember, I changed the spur gears so that get my 4.5 to 1 tail ratio. So those are slotted for a reason. Excellent, Matt. I do appreciate that. My gut tells me if you're running the 4.5, it'll need to be closer, because the overall gear diameter is probably a little smaller, fewer teeth. Just make sure you check that. Just hold the crown, the mushroom gear with your finger, and check the lash. Ever so slight. Should not be a lot. I like that a lot. That's going to work real well. Everything turns free. The one way spins free, as you can see. It's so free, just the tension of the torque tube transmission is able to stop the shaft. I like it. Done and done. We're going to move on to my tail box. When we come back, I'll have this completely torn apart. Alright guys, here we are. Tail box is pulled apart. I got the hubs off, the tail rotors off. I have the pitch turnbuckle pulled apart. Start off with the tail hub itself, tail case itself. This is really beefy. The bulk of the tail case is a solid piece of aluminum. You've got two side pieces, bearings captured there, as well as the spacer here. There's really no need to completely tear this apart. Just take the pivot point off, and then you can get to these two screws. Just pull them one at a time and check the Loctite on them. One at a time, check the Loctite. But one thing that's really important, I want to show you this. You see how the back side of that shaft is hollow? Oops, let me grab the right driver. That is because there is actually a set screw down inside there. And that set screw holds this pin that keys the tail drive gear. You have got to remember to pull that out and put some Loctite on it. If you don't, I promise over time it will back out. The set screws is easily accessible. I recommend you pull it all the way out. Get some blue on the threads. Rub it in a little bit. Again, don't go ape shit with all of the Loctite. You just gotta wet the threads. Put that down in there. Hold the gear, snug it up. That's going to keep that pin from coming out, therefore keep your tail shaft spinning properly. And that's all there is to it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull all 6 of these screws one by one, put Loctite on them, put them back in. I'm not doing these 3 yet. We'll talk about those when I put the tail on the boom. I'm going to do these 6, put that back together, and then put the pivot point back in with that one screw with Loctite. When we come back, I'll have this back together, and we can talk about the tail grips. Okay guys, I got the tail box completely together, everything Loctited, but I'm going to talk about something real quick, and that is the pitch turnbuckle here, tail pitch control turnbuckle. On this guy, there is a really long, looks like 30 millimeter or more, 3 millimeter bolt that goes through there. This whole shaft is threaded, but there's a nylock nut on there too, and I want to talk about why. All too often with some helicopters, when you tighten up this shaft, to feel comfortable that it's not going to back out, you tighten this screw so much that you bind this. Well, what we've done is you want to snug this up, but then you're going to run down this nylock bolt and leave it about a half thread too loose, and then back out the screw. So what happens here is the bolt and the nylock nut become a lock nut against this aluminum frame. This will never come out. Nylock holding it, plus the tension of the lock system, that won't go anywhere. And this, as you can see, moves freely. There's no play. Like I said, only leave a half a thread of slop there. You don't want to leave a full thread, or you'll have up and down play. But it's absolutely smooth. There is a little washer in there that contacts the inner bearing race. There is bearing in there, so make sure you don't lose that washer when you pull it apart. But if that's installed properly, that'll be completely friction-free, slop-free, and this nut will be locked tight against this piece. Also, I have had these balls come off. Anytime there's a metal ball into plastic, I like that Synergy pre-provided a washer for it. I pulled it out, Loctited the washer. I put Loctite on anything that caused me to crash. So that has red Loctite on that ball. It is not going to come off. Of course, I wiped the extra off and Don't want to leave Loctite laying everywhere. But that is together and smooth. Next, we're going to talk about the pitch control rod. Excuse me, pitch slider itself. There is another ball into plastic. I pulled that out and put CA on the threads. That may not be the appropriate thing to do. Maybe it's the recommended thing to do. I don't know, but I don't want there to be any chance of that ball backing out. So I just CA'd the threads and snugged it down. It's not going anywhere. And then you want to double check to make sure that these C-clips are on these pins real good and they're clean. And then I tore apart the main grips. Now there is a ball that goes on here. I will put that back together with Loctite. Pretty straightforward. You have an outer radial bearing and a shim, and then you have a thrust bearing. Same concept as the heads. One of these bearing races is tight on the hub, one is loose. The tight end, the tight race is the outer, goes on the blade side of the grip. The larger ID, with a little bit of play, goes on the hub side of the grip. Plenty of my Bodo lube in there. I did not tear apart both yet. I'm not going to bore you with the details. I'm sure they're identical. I'm going to red Loctite that ball, lube up my thrust bearing, get this all reassembled, and when we come back, I'll have a complete tail assembly. Alright guys, tail's back together. Nothing really out of the ordinary there. Talk about a couple quick things. I said it before, I'm going to say it again. I put red Loctite on anything that caused me to crash. That is doubly true for set screws. I have unfortunately neglected to put Loctite on a set screw once, and it cost a pretty nasty crash on a 600. So that there's a pretty healthy indentation or a spot on this tail shaft for that massive set screw. Red Loctite, line it up. Make sure you mount the hub so you have leading edge control on the tails, just like on your rotor head. So you got to think about it. The tail turns counterclockwise, so make sure when you put this all together that the pitch control is on the leading edge of the blade. Red Loctite there. I put red Loctite on the spindle bolts, as well as use my Bodo lube on the thrust bearings inside here. Got her all back together. I like to put a little bit of my Tri-Flow oil on this shaft just to kind of help with the brass bushing. Butter smooth. That is how it's supposed to look, guys. Piece of cake. Now, the next thing I need to do is one of two things. I need to either start messing with electronics or epoxy up the boom supports and the control rod ends for the tail control. I'm not going to bore you with video of that step. It's just, they're all the same. You mix up two-part epoxy. I'm going to use a good 40-minute set epoxy on the boom support ends and then the JB weld, a nice 12-hour set JB weld on the control rod. Now what I will do is take my same 200 grit sandpaper and scuff the end of these carbon fiber so that the epoxy and or JB weld can actually get past the glossy surface, have some ridges to bite against. I'm going to get these all, before I go to bed tonight, I'm going to get these all epoxy and JB welded up so that tomorrow's video, well, rather the next video can be about mounting electronics and getting this bird somewhat airframe ready. May not be tomorrow when I do that video. I'm still waiting on a couple pieces of the electronics. Normally I wouldn't start a build video until I had everything, but I got so excited about this E6 that when the main frame came in and the drive gear ratio stuff came in, I just couldn't help but start it. So that's going to be it for this video. We got quite a bit done tonight. The airframe is basically together. I did cut the boom and torque tube, although I did not do it on camera. We will be pinning this boom and torque tube, but again, one of the last things I do. I don't mess with any of that until it's all together and said. Measure twice, cut once is my philosophy there on those boom holes. This kit is really nice because it gives you the ability to pin both the front of the case and the tail box. So that's going to call that a night there, guys, and keep an eye out for the next video. It might actually be a couple of days before that video is live because, like I said, I'm still waiting on some electronics. So we'll go from there. Thanks for tuning in.